I think this is a feeling that a lot of keepers will recognize. And that is when we get into this hobby, we are so full of energy. There's so much to discover. So we put all that energy in information, finding information, just getting to know all the stuff we can get to know about them. So the care, how we can set them up, the animals itself. And then it's finally time to get your beautiful new animal. And you find out you're actually doing it and you're just so happy about it. It's so cool that it's finally happening. So then we think about, hey, maybe I can keep that other species I'm really interested in too. And before you know it, you're like, oh, maybe if I keep this one, it would be cool to have this one too. And our collection grows. And then we hit a wall. This wall can be several things. It can be simply finding out we have way more animals than we first intended, or something happens in our life that makes us have to pay attention to other things. And all that energy that we kept on putting in finding on information of this incredible new species, we're now putting into making sure that the animals stay alive. And a lot of keepers, I feel like, reach a point where they are like, maybe I'm in over my head. But imagine if all that energy that you keep putting into digging up information about your new animal, what if you put all that energy in one single project? Maybe even one single terrarium. So all that energy that you normally put in finding out all this new information gets focused into a single point. Just keep on fine-tuning your care and your knowledge about a single project. What would happen then? The host you are going to meet today, Flo, is finding that out, and to him, even one setup can already be overwhelming. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the European Herpetoculture podcast. In this episode, we are gonna meet another one of our hosts. That host is gonna be Flo. Say hi,
Hello.
Flo. Hello, Flo.
Hello.
Hi. Flo is a keeper from Germany. We actually met through Instagram, and we also did a video at your place, which was really cool. I'm gonna make sure that links are somewhere so you can find it. And the goal of today is to get to know Flo better, because he's gonna be one of the main hosts of this podcast. See what he is keeping, his routes in the herpetoculture, also what his future plans are, what he's trying to achieve with the podcast. And we are going to talk a little bit already about European herpetoculture and what we hope the future looks like.
Let's
Yeah, you
go.
agree?
Yeah, it's good.
Let's get right into it, Flo. Let's start with the most obvious question for those people who don't know you. I'm very curious, how did you get started in this hobby? And maybe you can share some like key moments that made you go in the direction you are currently going in or working towards.
Since I was born, I was like always into animals. I can't remember a time where are like excited about reptiles and stuff like that. So it was like since the beginning, and I can't really remember how old I was, but I think it was like 6, 7, something like that. My dad told me that a friend of his has like own little reptile shop in his garage, and I was like, oh my god, can we go there? And he was like, yeah, of course. And that's like a memory in my mind that I will never forget. When he opened up the door to the garage, it was like this tiny little garage, and it was like all these terrariums in there, and also free roaming panther chameleon. And I was like, oh my god, it's I wasn't able to really digest all of this, because like the heat and everything, it was so much to see, right? And this was the first time I actually thought to myself, oh, okay, you can do this as a hobby, you can keep reptiles like this. It was like unbelievable. And yeah, from this guy, I was getting my first panther chameleon. This was actually my first reptile I ever owned. Before that, I had like invertebrates, like praying mantises and stuff like that. And he was also a guide of mine. So I worked at this place a little bit. And later, he even had a bigger shop, and I still was working there sometimes. And he was like 5 years ago, he passed away. So that was pretty sad because like he was a big inspiration for me and taught me a lot of things. Yeah, this was like the start of the hobby. And I think it's same for a lot of people. You start with something and then once you are in it, you want more, right? You have always the urge to, maybe this animal, I can build a terrarium for this animal. And my parents were kind enough to gave me like a room where they said, okay, do your stuff. We don't allow spiders and snakes. This was the only rule that we had. And yeah, feel free to do your live out your passion because they saw like I'm really into it and my dad always helped me out building stuff. So it grew from a pentachameleon to coralid lizards. I kept tortoises, water dragons, stuff like that. And I recognized the pattern that I always wanted like bigger animals, right? So, I have a coralid lizard. Oh, maybe get a water dragon. It's even bigger and even cooler. And then I had a water dragon and stuff like that. And yeah, at some point of time, I had like 20 animals. That is not really that much compared to other people, but for me it was a lot. And then I was like, oh, okay, maybe that's too much. I really want a monitor lizard. That was always my dream. And I asked my parents if we can build like a really, really big enclosure because I wanted to keep Varanus indicus, so the mangrove monitor. And my dad said, okay, let's build like a big enclosure. And it was like 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters. So actually pretty big. And I got two juvenile mangrove monitors. And one died really early when I was keeping him because he was like getting crushed under the water pond. It was like a fucking stupid mistake of mine that I haven't really secured the water area. And then the second animal was always getting bigger, bigger, and bigger. And with mangrove monitors, there's like different subspecies, right? Some of them are not that big, getting maybe to 90 centimeters, but you have also other localities that is like almost 1.5 meters. And I thought I have like a smaller subspecies, right? And it was like, I thought it's going to get like nearly a meter at max, right? And then he grew, he grew, he grew. And my mother at some point asked me, Flo, are you sure you told us this is the monitor you wanted, right? And I was like, yeah, I think he's full grown now. But he wasn't. He was a big animal. He was like nearly 1.5 meters. And then at some point, it was like, okay, now I have this full grown monitor lizard in this terrarium. And what I do with it, I feed it every 4 days. It has like one big core cube because it was so big, a big water bowl that I had like to change every week. And I was feeling really guilty. This was the first time I actually felt guilt for keeping an animal this size. And this was the first time I really was thinking about, okay, maybe that's the wrong way. That's not my way I want to go. I really want to be able to see natural behaviors of animals and not just a big animal to flex in a terrarium. So I decided to give away the monitor lizard to a friend of mine, and they have like huge amount of space, and this was like a really big enclosure. And I had like this empty big setup, and I was like, oh, maybe I could do like a big terrarium, but with small animals. So at that point of time, I wasn't really into habitats and stuff like that. So I had Bombina orientalis in there and Anolis roquette and also Acanthosaura capra. So classic mixed species enclosure. And also plants from the typical plants, monsteras, pothos, stuff like that. But it was amazing to see the animals behave. It's crazy. The Andos were super tame. They were running around like crazy. The Bobina also, the Acanthosaura, they were well caught, so they died pretty quickly because I was not really paying attention to them, to be honest. It was like I bought them because I thought they were cool, but not really giving them what they needed. And yeah, this was like the time I realized, okay, that's the way I want to go.
Okay, and now you are at a very different place. You have what can be seen behind you if people are watching this podcast on the YouTube. Really big setup with two species of animals, I believe, three,
Yeah, two.
two species of
Yeah.
animals. Um, did you go straight from the big setup with a few small lizards to this, or
Mm.
was there like a stage in between where you tried stuff out? Like, what led you to the point you are now? Because you had a realization, you felt that guilt, something I recognize. Then you started to add the small animals, and you really like that. So, how does your hobby look from that point on to now?
This was like still at my parents' place, but I moved together with my girlfriend. And over the period of time, I debuilt the big enclosure and had like dart frogs and was really getting into like natural setups, building natural backgrounds, and finding more and more interest and fun in creating slices of jungle, right? And then I moved together with my girlfriend and I bought my first snakes because I was a free man now. You don't have any parents to tell you what to get and what not to get, right? No, I bought Corylus hortulanus, so the Amazon tree boas, and I set them up in like I had 4 Amazon tree boas. Uh, 2 were super tiny juveniles that I sold later, and 2 I had like in exoterras. And this was like the first time I really was like building a proper good looking enclosure, in my opinion, for the snakes. And yeah, at that period of time, I also um, been a little bit more active on Instagram and found Ben. And then we connected over Instagram. And there was like a point also again where the snakes are getting a little big. And I thought to I actually talked with Ben about it because I wanted like a bigger setup, but I wasn't really sure what to get. And the uh, glass terrarium was like super heavy and a big size. And then we talked about this idea to why not build a greenhouse? So like use the materials that you will see in like outdoor greenhouses. Maybe we can build something like this indoor. And because like super not cheap, but like super lightweight materials and stuff like that, you are very free to design your own stuff, right? And we moved to another apartment, and then we had like the super high ceilings. And in that period of time, Ben started to build his greenhouse. So this was like the first prototype, let's call it like that. And then I was like, okay, yeah, I'm also gonna do that for the Amazon Green tree boas. And yeah, we built the greenhouse that you see behind me. It's like 1.5 meters long, 1.5 meters deep, and almost 3 meters high. So pretty big. And this was like, yeah, okay, now I can really be creative and create something beautiful because it's also my living room and it's the only setup I have in the apartment. So I really wanted to be like a super beautiful piece of furniture in the living room. And yeah, I built it together with Ben, and I moved in the Amazon tree boas, and then I found Corotophanes cristatus, so the helmeted iguanas. So I sold the Amazon tree boas, and the struggle is when you only have like one setup. So that's my personal struggle. It's like hard to find a species that you really, really wanted to keep from the bottom of your heart. I think the snakes were more like, okay, now I can do it, but over the period of time I thought to myself, okay, no, I'm not that snake guy, you know. I really like the lizards and also frogs and stuff like that, but snakes isn't for me, to be honest. It was a little bit not boring, but it wasn't feeling right for me. So I sold them, and then I had the Corytophanes, and then I saw Enyaloides laticeps, and it was always a dream species of mine. And I I thought I'm not gonna be able to buy them because they are super expensive. But he offered me a great deal, and I jumped on it, sold the Corytophanes, and now I have in the setup the Enyaloides laticeps and one female Leptophyma smithies, or the night lizard. And that's currently the species that I keep, and I think that I still gonna keep because I really enjoy them.
I would like to know a little bit more about the Enyaloides also, how you experienced them thus far. I think that's very interesting for people because not a lot are keeping them. I only know a few keepers. But when I was at your place to make the video, we also went to the botanical garden in Tübingen. And you
Yeah.
told me you also came there since you were pretty young.
Mm.
But your whole naturalistic keeping only started a whole lot later. So I wonder, with at what point, because when we were there, you
Mm.
had, oh look, this is how they do it here. This is also how we
Mm.
do it in my greenhouse. So you
Yeah.
took away from that. When did that start? Did you start to make connections between botanical gardens and your greenhouse and the way you keep your animals or plants actually?
So I think the naturalistic style of keeping was always there since the beginning, but I didn't really understand how it works. You know what I mean? So I never enjoyed like the bare setups with only like substrate and a branch or something. I always, when I was younger, I always get like stuff from outside and leaf litter and isopods, and didn't even notice it's like bioactive. So I just thought it was natural. So this was like always there, and I always wanted like to have a slice of jungle, and not just keep an animal for keeping an animal. But I think the connection with the greenhouses was like a slow process, with also being interested in plants over the years more and more, and understanding better how they do it in like botanical gardens or zoos, and talking to keepers, zookeepers or stuff like that, being more confident to talk to people. When you are young, you are not that confident to ask questions, right? And yeah, and I was feeling like, okay, cool. I can pick from every area what I think it's cool, and what I think it's useful for me, and apply it to the setup. And I think it was just a slow process in my head, that you can pick from every area, you can pick something to learn from, right? Even from gardening outside, or something completely different, maybe from your job. Oh, okay, maybe we do it like this. Maybe I can also incorporate something like this in a different way in the greenhouse, right? So a little bit, yeah, I think I become very open-minded over the last few years, and get a lot of input from outside, and process it in a way that I can use it for the greenhouse. Yeah, I think that's like the explanation for that. So I don't have a specific time when it started. I think it was like over the years.
Yeah, so that's I think the natural progress that a lot of keepers go through. First you start with the animal and just making sure it's alive, and then you start to look a little
Yeah.
bit broader. Are there like certain sources of inspiration to you that you use for your setup in or outside the hobby, like from different hobbies or Facebook groups? Or I talked to Till and he found the Facebook group that made him realize that it was possible to do it the way he hoped to do it. Do you have a similar form of inspiration?
Yeah, for me, it's like also Instagram was also a big inspiration. Mm, YouTube also, but YouTube was more like, okay, how can I build like a back wall or something like that? Not in particular setups, because a lot of setups I don't really enjoy what I see on YouTube. Your channel was inspiration, and yeah, a lot. To be honest, a lot of inspiration came from actual greenhouses, because I really like the vibe from a greenhouse, from a botanical garden. And I think that was like my main inspiration. And of course, nature. Just go outside and look around with open eyes, and you can see, um, yeah, stuff that you can incorporate. But I don't have like a specific person or something like that that was a really big influence. It was like a bunch of different scenarios that I have.
Yeah, it all sounds like a very natural progress of the hobby. It does sound like you were lucky to be able to start in a store like that, so you're exposed to a lot of different
Yeah.
animals. But I can also certainly understand that um, there's so much to explore, then it's hard to choose.
Mhm.
So finding the
Yeah.
species that fits for you is like a natural progress.
Yeah. It's like also, I think that's something that I learned only over the recent 2 or 3 years, that when you only have like one setup, on the one hand, you always want more, but on the other hand, you can dive so deep into one species or into one setup. It's crazy, because like I'm thinking like almost all day long. I think about the enclosure, and how can I improve it? And okay, so maybe I change the light a little bit like this, or maybe we can build something that the light is moving over the enclosure over the day, or getting really deep into feeder insects. It's like you can dive so deep into this hobby that sometimes it's even overwhelming to have like only one species. That's the crazy part. I think that's what I really learned. So of course, more enclosures are like cool, because you have like maybe one setup is not doing that great, then you have a second setup where you can look at and are like, oh, okay, that's going fine. But when you have one setup, you can dive super deep into it. It's really amazing.
Oh, that's cool. It sounds cool that you say that it's almost can be overwhelming just having one species.
Yeah,
Because for a lot of people, they hit like a wall when they keep a little bit more animals than they can handle, and that can
yeah,
change for every person, of course. And you said like now it can be almost overwhelming because if you go
yeah.
deep into it, you only need one species. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, because like when you look, for example, for a diet, you go on a naturalist, look where it is, for example, for the Enyalides, they're from the Ecuadorian region, and then you look, okay, what kind of insects are there? And then you Google blah 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 blah, these katydids, this one, and you're like, okay, damn, maybe I should buy these as a feeder and not feed like nocturnal roaches. Or oh, I saw one like article where they told that some of the Enyalides are looking for like small um arthropods on like dead branches, and even looking for them specifically in dead tree trunks and stuff like that. And then you go down that rabbit hole and you're like, oh, maybe I can build this, maybe I can do that. And it's like, it's really much. Sometimes maybe I think you can't do too much, but maybe I have sometimes like a point where I'm like, damn, am I really able to give this animal 100% proper care in the human husbandry? And it's like sometimes it's like, oh, I don't know what I'm is if it's really like the best thing to do. We always think we know what we are doing, but you can't really, when you compare it like with nature, it's like crazy.
I do think it's good for a person to have a little bit of doubt like that. It can be nerve wracking, and indeed you come to this point like, will I ever, will it ever be okay enough? I think,
Yeah,
but having those doubts also drives you to do a step better every time, and it's also part of the progress you made. I
yeah,
think so. It can be nerve wracking and also a bit how do I say this, confronting almost,
yeah. Maybe
but it's a good. Go ahead.
sometimes it's even too much. You know what I mean? When you're like always, oh, is it really that good? Is it really that good? Sometimes it's like I'm really like a person that thinks a lot, and sometimes I overthink stuff, you know? And that's sometimes also a little bit difficult, right? But yeah, that's also part of it, I think.
So I wonder, because you're making a new step, maybe you can share with the listeners what that step is, and that's certainly gonna impact the way you can or gonna keep your animals. So I do wonder, like, at the point you are now, what are the changes in, or what are you working on? What is the projects you're working on? But also, how do you think that's going to impact you as a keeper?
Mhm. Yeah, so I'm moving to Denmark end of this year, and I have to like debuild the enclosure and build a smaller version of it because I thought a lot about it, how I should do it, because I can't move this thing over to Denmark, and we don't have like an apartment yet, so I don't know how tall the ceilings are and stuff like that. So we're gonna build a smaller version of it that fits in every apartment. And yeah, that's something I thought about because like, yeah, you're gonna definitely downsize. It's like gonna be maybe half of it that it's now. And I think that's gonna be also interesting to see how the animals behave, how they will change. And also it's like uh also difficult for me to see like the animals in a smaller setup because at the moment I'm always like, oh damn, that's a big setup, but maybe even bigger one would be great, right? Sometimes, sometimes I feel like I'm overthinking it too much because I'm never 100% happy with it. I always feel like, oh, maybe a little bit bigger, a little bit better. Um, but the second version of it will be also a great opportunity to learn from mistakes that I made and also adjust some things I would do different because like at the moment since half a year or even more I have like very bad luck with like trips and stuff like that in the enclosure. And that's also something that really sucks and see plants die. And you can't really do something against it because spraying with chemicals is like not the way I want to go. And it's also not good for the animals. And I have like biological pest control, like with predatory mites, but it's in a setup like this, it's like it's hard to to work against it. So it's also a good thing to restart the enclosure and really think about what I would do different to now. And the positive thing is the Anialides are not very active. So sometimes they are, but they're really like the Corytophanes or something like that. There are a lot of times they chill for days on one branch. So I'm not super concerned that their setup will be too small, and I don't think I will feel guilty for them because like they don't move a lot. And that's also why I chose like this species, or in general, there's like lots of absurd arboreal agamids and iguanas. Like you have, and I think that's my niche, and I want to go down with like building great setups, but having like lizards that don't move as much, and the focus is more on like the habitat itself and not on the lizard.
So how does, I'm gonna ask you the question a little bit later in the episode, like what do you think the future of the hobby in general look like? But I do then wonder what how do you think your future in this hobby, how do you hope that takes like shape? Not necessarily the species, maybe if there's some species you would still really like to keep, let us know. Maybe somebody, knows something.
Uh,
But yeah, but like the adjustments you want to make or the approach you want to take, how does that look for you? Or what are you working towards?
it's a little bit difficult because I have to see how in Denmark the whole living situation is. Of course, I really want to build something like a similar size to this one again, but be much more into the habitat. So at the moment, I have like plants from South America, but I really want to go deeper into the habitat, only plants from the Ecuadorian region. And that's something I really want to go down to. And yeah, maybe like bring like sunrise, sunset, thunderstorms, something like that. So really try to recreate nature in the setup. That's something I really would love to go into, and also a little bit different kind of plants. At the moment, I have like a lot of aeroids, and be like more into ferns, miniature orchids, mosses, and make it much more naturalistic. Uh, that's the road I want to go down. And yeah, just adjust. For example, at the moment, I'm not very happy with the misting setup because it's not perfectly for the height that I have it on right now. So that's something I want to adjust. And species wise, I would love to get something like from the Sri Lankan area, but I don't know if I have like the space for it. Mm, yeah, but like in the maybe future when we are settled in or something like that, I really want to have like a walk in big greenhouse botanical garden style. That's like my absolutely go-to dream, because imagine chilling in your own miniature botanical garden. It's like, damn, that's the vibe.
Yeah, I think that's the goal of at least all of us hosts,
Yeah, oh
to
man.
have some. Till said the same in
Yeah.
his episode, and I'm sure Ben is gonna go
Yeah.
crazy on that
Yeah.
part. Yeah, but I
Yeah.
do understand that. I think it's really good for people to hear, but also maybe like a bit like surprising, because I think a lot of people will look at your enclosure, and again, for those wondering, we will make sure you know where to find it. That they will look at your enclosure and be like, "Wow, this is it! Like, what am I doing?"
Yeah.
I also have that when I see your enclosure. So I think it's good for people to hear that almost that endless struggle of wanting to do better is like real, and that you need to realize that it's there. Also to be a little bit forgiving towards yourself for
Yeah,
the person who has
100%.
that feeling, because it's gonna stay there. I do
Yeah.
recognize it. Like a while ago, I was looking at my animals and like, man, you're not experiencing wind.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need
Right.
to build fans so you can experience the wind once in a while, or crazy stuff like that.
Yeah. Right. It never goes away. That's also a sad part, because like sometimes I think like I don't really sit down and enjoy it. You know what I mean? I see it and I only see like what can I do better? And then sometimes I imagine myself being like a little kid and walking into the apartment and seeing this, I would be blown away, right? But I don't have this view on the setup. That's like, I think maybe it's something in my head, but I think that's a feeling that you never, when it's like a never-ending story. That's also uh bad and good, in my opinion, because you always keep on going, but you never, maybe when time flies by and you realize, oh, you did something great, you can really enjoy it. Uh, but yeah, I think it never will end, that you always want to be or build a better version, or see this and think, next time I'm do this background a little bit different, and then you do it a little bit different, and then the next enclosure, still this and that.
I recognize this feeling so much, so I do
Yeah,
understand it
right.
for sure, for
Yeah,
sure. Um, I do sometimes wonder for people who have that feeling if they ever come to a point like maybe it's better not to keep any animals. But on the other
yeah,
hand, I think I still believe that reptiles, herpetofauna, a lot of species are very well suited to be kept in captive care. So, and
Yeah,
if somebody does it like you do, then I have absolutely no issues with it at all.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's not the point that I'm like, I'm not feeling like keeping animals anymore because I feel like I can't really provide them what they want. That's nothing. That's not at all the case. It's like always like I just like to go down really deep into rabbit holes, you know. So creating something great.
And now you are diving in the rabbit hole of doing a podcast, talking to guests. Um,
Yeah,
I'm still really excited. I think everybody can feel that we all are like really excited to do this.
yeah.
So we all already talked a little bit about this in the launch episode, but for you, what do you maybe good for the listeners to know that as I mentioned in the previous video, but if you haven't seen it, that every host is gonna switch a little bit depending on the guests, and we're gonna make sure that the topic and the guest gets the fitting host, so there's the most optimal conversation there, and that way we can also all learn to do a podcast. Now you clearly have some like your expertise and your needs and your interest, um, but what would you personally like to achieve with the podcast? What is something you are hoping for? What do you hope that we can do with this? And what would be your main inputs according to you?
Mm.
That's a lot of questions in one question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So what I want to do with is like, I think it's a great opportunity to show other keepers and other people that we are all reptile keepers or all exotic animal keepers are like in the same boat, right? We all have the same struggles. We all have like the same dreams, most of us at least. And to really I think there's sometimes missing like the reconnection between the keepers. You know what I mean? You have like a few people that you really like and you are connected good to them, but it's always like a battle against each other. Ah, this person doing this stuff, this person is doing it like this. And I really maybe it would be super cool to like get more connected with the whole community and not judge each other because everybody started somewhere, so nobody is like perfect. And I oftentimes uh see myself when I see a post or something like, oh, how can he do that? But then I think about him like, oh, damn, like 10 years ago you didn't do it better, right? And yeah, spread more love in this hobby. That's like it's such an amazing hobby, right? And you can learn from everybody, even some from beginners. Maybe they have like a question that you never thought of. And same for like the super experts, like zookeepers or something. You can learn from everybody. I think you should stay really open-minded and listen to everyone. Of course, that you don't have to like every person in the hobby, but we are also in the same boat, and I really want to yeah represent a hobby a little bit better and not all the crazy reptile hobby people. No, we are like super passionate about what we are doing and how we are doing it. There's always like black sheeps like everywhere, but most of us just love the animals, and that's something I really want to showcase and what other people are doing. And yeah, I think what was the other question? Like when I will hop on or something like that? What was?
I can't remember. No, I think it's mostly indeed what you would like to achieve. So that's what you
Mm.
very clearly explained in this last part. I really like to hear that, and I also wonder like what type of conversations I guess you would like to have, and what are the topics that you are most interested in, or the
Mhm.
route you want to take in the conversations.
To be honest, I'm open to everything, but I really like of course, the naturalistic way. how people are approaching their setups, how they maybe think about stuff, how they think about why you did how did you build this enclosure, or how came you up with this idea, or yeah, something like that. And yeah, also just listen to other people's and hear their opinion about stuff, and interact with each other. That's like my main my main goal. And yeah, that's basically what I want from it.
That's
Just be cool
already more
people.
than enough.
Yeah.
That's already
Yeah.
more than enough. Really cool. I think that's a really good explanation on what you like to achieve. And for the listeners, I think it's cool to know that stuff, you know, get to know you a little bit better and your goals. And hopefully the viewers or the listeners are listening to it and are like, man, that sounds really interesting. And they are hopping on the next episode.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And I also asked still this question, and we are gonna get more into it along making the next episodes of this podcast. It's gonna be one of the main themes. But one of the biggest reasons for us to start this podcast, next to what you just presented, is that when we went on other podcasts, which weren't European, there were always a question like, how do you experience European herpetoculture? And for me, that was the first time I even needed to think about that.
Yeah.
So I wonder, for you, what was European herpetoculture a separate thing before you got asked that question? And and have you thought about it since? And what does the European herpetoculture, what does that like word mean to you, and what separates it from any other culture? You know,
Yeah.
is there even for you a European herpetoculture?
Yeah. Uh, So before I got asked this question, I never thought about it, to be honest. It was like it was one hobby, right? One person in the US, the other one in Asia, and we are here in Germany or Netherlands, right? No, I didn't make a difference. Definitely not, because I only experienced also this type of keeping here in Germany. So I never been to the US or something like that and experience how keepers are doing it there. Um, the difference, it's like I think a lot about it, but to be honest, it's like I think maybe it's like that. I don't know. I think Roy said that. I'm not pretty sure, but in the US, it's more like because no, different. So in Germany, I feel like there's not the market to really produce a lot of animals, right? Because at least in my area, I can think about one reptile shop in 50 kilometers radius around me. So there's very few reptile stores or specific shops. And I feel like for example, in the US, you have a lot more. That's what it feels like to me. You have like a lot more like PetSmart and Petco, and we don't have the stuff like in Germany. You When I was younger, there was like Fressnapf and stuff like that that had like a few reptiles, but now it's all only rabbits and fish. Um, so I feel like we don't have a lot of big batch breeders, only a handful, at least that I know of. Um, and also, yeah, don't really know. Maybe we are a little bit more active on social media or something like that, or it's hard because I think people from the US or something are only seeing like maybe the better examples of the European guys. But when I walk through Ham or be on eBay or something or Instagram, and I'm like, oh damn, we also have like the shitty keepers. You know what I mean? It's like it's no big difference. Maybe we have access to different materials and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I don't think it's uh, yeah, it's such a hard question. I don't even know what to say about it. For me, for example, it's like the Australian keepers are always also very great with building naturalistic stuff. They are also very, very good, and also with the outdoor setups and stuff like that. I feel like they are also a little bit different to the German ones, right?
Yeah, and they also all seem to be zookeepers somehow.
Yeah. All of them are zookeepers.
They always double as a zookeeper somehow. So that's
Yeah.
or do something in the field at least. I do have a short question. I like this answer and the stumbling around the answer because that means
Yeah.
like it's hard answer to give
Yeah,
or hard question to answer. So it's great for our roundtable episode a little bit further down the line and
yeah.
explore this also with our guests because I think it's going to be the first time they are asked this question. I do have one question though. Since you have been to a reptile show, did you ever buy a reptile in a pet store?
Let me think about it. For I think I never bought something. No, I never bought a reptile from a pet store.
Yeah, because that could, of course, be an explanation for shops not selling those animals anymore and specialist shops not really having a future because we in Germany there is the biggest reptile and or herpetofauna, however you want to call it, show in the whole world when it comes to visitors and exhibitors. And it still looks pretty much the same as 20 years ago. So I do wonder if just the money spending crowd within our culture has just moved to reptile shows. But
Yeah.
that's maybe one explanation. But indeed, we do not. If I could think of a difference that is relatively obvious to me, is that with us, it's definitely starting and staying more as a hobby and you
Yeah.
know and I feel like the American, or at least that side of the pond, is there's a lot of entrepreneurs, land of the free, land of the brave, create your own. And I think there it is also often seen as how can I expand this to make it something bigger, make money off it, or I
Yeah,
don't
that's
know.
true. Yeah, I
That would
think you
be
said it, not Roy. Sorry, I think you said it in a
oh
podcast with Roy. That is like a difference. Yeah. Yeah, true. Yeah. I feel like almost everybody that has more than 3 reptiles in the US want to go big batch with it, right?
yeah. And it did translate to us. Like I feel like that mindset when it was seen, people in Europe saw an opportunity to like, hey, this is an option. Just as seeing naturalistic setups or seeing bioactive setups or seeing crazy backgrounds like you did. Like, oh, or a certain species, like, whoa, is that in the hobby? Like that happens with Lantanotis, like crazy amount of time. I get so many messages of people seeing the Lantanotis. The first question is, what is that? And the second question is, where can I buy it? That's
Yeah.
straight. So yeah, but it's a I think great answer again. I think it's gonna be fun exploring this.
Yeah. To be honest, do you think we will ever get to the bottom of this? Because maybe it's also like a question. It's a great question to ask every guest, and maybe that's also for the US or the other listeners outside of Europe. Maybe it's also interesting for them that we are not different. You know what I mean? We are
Yeah,
not that
yeah,
extra fancy because, like, yeah, I think it's like a question with an open bottom, you know?
yeah, yeah. But I think we will reach a point where we maybe can answer why this question is
Hmm.
asked in the first place.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
does people what perception is created that makes people want to ask this question?
Yeah.
Or maybe
Totally.
we just turn out to be a whole lot better. Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe we are just
Maybe we are the top of the
yeah. Maybe we
thing.
are the top of the on the top of the hill, the big gorilla.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah. So Flo, I think we had a great episode thus far. I really like how this is going, and I'm looking forward to even more now. But
Same.
I think the question I want to end with, and the question I also ask still is, what do you think the future for our hobby as a whole looks like? Like, or maybe, okay, I'm like putting many questions into one question. So
That's
these are
okay.
two questions. One question is, what do you hope the future of our hobby looks like? Or what would you like to, see the direction it takes? Maybe it's already going in there. And the other question is, what do you actually think it looks like? So what do you hope? What do you think it looks like? And what can be our role in that?
For me, it's like, what I hope is like that people really think about what they want to get and not like just buying animals because they like to collect. So buy animals because you like them and keep them correctly and not just like be a Pokemon card crazy collector and like, oh, this week I bought 10 new reptiles and everybody is set up the same. I think that's something I really hope that it's going away from. So be more like also smaller reptiles. But I think that's something that I see like at least on social media that's like not that trendy anymore to get like a big snakes or big lizards. At least it feels like to me. And also, to be honest, I don't really know what direction is actually going because with new laws and stuff like that, I hope we are able to still keep animals in a few years, right? You never know. But it's also on us if we still can keep it, right? Because when you always have to think about like an outside person. When an outside person sees an enclosure or a rack, for example, of course they think like it's super bad for the animals, right? Or just see a setup with a glass room with no background, paper towel, a hide, and a water ball. Okay, how do you explain that to someone that isn't in the hobby and say, yeah, that's totally fine for the animal, right? And I feel like that's something we have in our own hands to represent the hobby. And at the moment, there's like only bad publicity for us. And when it goes that way, I can totally understand why people want to ban like the exotic animal keeping, right? That's for me a no-brainer. Of course, when you see setups or how people take care of the animals, it's crazy sometimes. And I hope that that's something people also realize that we need to change and maybe, yeah, maybe look at your setup like how would a person that's not in a hobby react to your setup? Do you think the person will say, oh yeah, of course, yeah, it's like super cool, it's like a slice of nature, or of course you can keep it in there, or do you think it's like, hmm, I'm a crazy reptile guy, right? And that's something I hope that people get in their minds that we have it in our own hands how this whole journey is going if we can keep exotic animals.
Great answer. I really like that, what you said, that maybe look at your enclosure like somebody else will look at it that has no knowledge. And that can help with two things. One, it can help you appreciate what you have. So you need to invite more people over, I think. But because um a person seeing that for the first time, they don't have the same background as you do, but also not the memories, and they don't know the faults and the mistakes and what you wanted to do different. Just
Yeah.
they see it as it is, and they appreciate it as for what it is. And the other, indeed, like, let a person that has no knowledge but just look at it. Yeah, I think that's a great one. Absolutely great one. I think people can take a lot from that.
Yeah, I hope so.
Cool. There was also something else I wanted to say or ask, but I can't remember. So maybe that's for for
Yeah,
another
maybe
one.
for
I need to
next.
start writing down. So
Yeah.
Flo, I really liked doing this one with you. Is
Yeah,
there
same.
anything you felt like that was left on the table before we are gonna end this episode?
No, I don't think. I think it's like a quick overview who I am, but I think, to be honest, over the episodes, the people will get to know each other better and what opinions we on what side of the opinions we have. And yeah, I think for now it's like fine, and I'm really looking forward for episode with other keepers. I think it's gonna be very cool, and also super excited that we actually did start the podcast, right? It's crazy that we are doing it. Yeah, it's crazy.
In that case, I think it's a good one to end the podcast soon. So for everybody who made it up to here, thank you so much. Flo is actually also our PR department. So Flo is handling our Instagram page and also doing some other work. So if you send a message to our Instagram, you're probably are gonna talk to Flo. And of course,
Yes,
we're
sir.
also gonna make sure that we have your individual info somewhere. I think in the description or show notes it's called.
Yeah.
And
Both.
yeah, the next episode is gonna be with Ben, one of the other hosts. So yeah, looking forward to that one, and I hope you are gonna join us then too. And for now, we are gonna say goodbye.
Goodbye, and don't forget to follow us and subscribe us on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, European Herpetoculture.podcast. Shout outs to everybody. Peace out, people.
Bye bye. Thank you so much.
Yeah, bye.
I will look for how do I
It's a wrap. It's a wrap.